one of the things you might have to do is provide JSON or XML to consumers of your application. This is just going to go through some of the challenges and things that you'll come across as you attempt to do it for yourself. So we're going to work with just a table that's got posts, and what I just want to make sure is that the cake, bake, all posts is just that you can see that's all it is. We've got just default bake views there, and we're going to just work through creating XML files for each. Now in the documentation you'll see that the first thing that they recommend is that you override in your controller this view classes method and then specify these two views. So that basically says when you're looking for a class, it's got to be one of these. So when we first do that, we press enter and we find, yes, it's looking here for post XML index template file. So how do we get that working? Well, here we see the key. We need to specify a serialize key. So to do that, all we have to do is go into our index view, which is the one we're hitting, and we want to specify that we want to serialize the post variable, view variable. So once that's specified, when we again hit the index action, it will immediately know to turn the post variable into XML. But notice here we have specified two different classes. Now you would assume that if it's defaulting to one, that if I then commented out XML view, that immediately it would switch to using XML, but sadly it doesn't, and I'm not sure why, because the documentation seems to indicate that it should do that. I don't know if it's just something that I'm not understanding, but it's just not converting it straight to an XML view. So I'm going to comment this out and then just look at how we can get the client to request a specific either XML, the default Cake app view, or the JSON view here. So how can we do that? Well, if we scroll to here, so just under enabling data views, we can see that there's an option here to enable extensions. So what that does basically is you copy this snippet of code, and it mentions that it needs to be the first thing you should do. Enabling extensions is the first thing you do in a scope. So we go to our roots file, and then straight under the scope here we set our extensions. Now once that's done, we can then go to post and type post.xml or post.json, and CakePHP will automatically swap in the correct view, and then obviously the default view comes up. So that's the same thing, because it's a default, the index view is the default. It's the same thing as doing that more longhand option, as you can see in the menu bar there, or the location bar. So that's how you can specify individual view swap out using extensions. Another option is the accept header. So I've got Postman running here, and I'm going to hit the same endpoint. If I hit send here, notice what it does. It basically redirects me to a login page. And that's because in my current application, if I just have a look at the loaded plugins, I've got CakeDC users running. So in order to make an endpoint or an action to bypass authentication, what we have to do when we're running CakeDC users, or this might happen with Authentication plugin as well, but we're just looking at CakeDC users plugin here. We want to go into our vendor CakeDC users config and the permissions file and copy our permissions.php file into the config folder in the root of our project. And this has a configuration array that sets up the CakeDC users default permissions, and what we just need to do is override the posts action, which is the index action, and say that we want, if someone tries to access it, don't worry about authenticating them. You don't need to know who they are. It's anonymous, so bypass the authentication. So once we've done that and we go back to our Postman thing, we can see that if we don't set an accept header, it just gives us the default application view. If we set an application JSON value for the accept header, we get JSON, and then if we swap to the text XML, we get XML. So that's two methods of specifying what type of view we're wanting, via extension or via the accept header. So how can we make that sort of automated? So for example, if the client wanted to specify what type of view it was looking for, well, there is a part of the documentation. If you go right to the bottom of the documentation, it shows us how to choose a view class, and we can do that for ourselves. So let's just look at doing that, choosing a particular view from our index. Now, first of all, we say, well, what type of view is the client asking for? So we might say, all right, string to lower, we want to normalize whatever they give us. So let's go this request and get a query and specify that we're looking for type, and if they don't give us, if that's blank, we just want to return app, and then we can create an array that specifies all the different view types that we can return to a client. So we've got, right, so there's our 3 view types. Now if the client gives gibberish, so they pass gibberish, we want to catch that by throwing a new not found exception, and we might say invalid format. So once we have that, we now have to specify programmatically which class name we're going to use. So we say formats and type. So by default, again, it's going to default to the app view, which is the default view. If we then say type equals JSON, it will give us JSON formatting. And then if we say type equals XML. Now there is a problem with this is that if we say we're going to get an issue with if we say want to specify by extension, then it's going to get into a deadly embrace because the class name is going to be wrong. So you might have to handle that in another way. So you just being realized that if you say type JSON and you also specify it via a you'll get these problems occurring quite regularly. So just be aware that you need to do something else programmatically to make sure that that doesn't happen. But there's an option for automatically choosing a view class by passing it to the action via a query string, or you can do that as an argument as well. So now we're going to look at something else, which is, so we're just going to comment out this code that we don't use at the moment. And now we're going to look at what happens when we ask for an XML file or a JSON file, and it's templates. So in our documentation it says that yes, we can use data views with template files, and because we're not using this serialize key, when we ask for XML and there's no serialize key, it doesn't know what to do. So then it says, well, you must be wanting me to construct this using a template. So then it errors out because there is none. So let's create templates. So go into templates, posts. Now each time it asks for a specific type of template, it's in a directory. So we'll create one for JSON and one for XML. Now JSON's the easiest to do, so we're going to create the JSON template first, and the very simplest we can do is just say, okay, just echo back to me all that data using just that template. You can, of course, start to modify things before you echo it to screen. So if you want to do a for each posts as, and you can unset maybe body, maybe you can even add new value equals alright, so you can do that, and so read a structure, so you can see that yes, we've added new values in, we've also unset the body so it's no longer showing. So that is using a template file with JSON encode. Now we want to look at perhaps it's a more complicated, it's creating an XML template. So how would we do that? So here we say, well, I want to create an XML document. So let's start by creating a simple XML element and create a root. And you could make that anything you want, you know. So create a root and then do a for each and go and then what you want to do, you want to say, okay, I want to add a child. I'm going to name it post. Then to post child, I want to add another child called title and do that there like that. Then perhaps I want to this child, I want to add an attribute and say ID equals post ID. And so once you've done that, you could obviously keep going and modify it to whatever you wanted. You can simply it's requested, and therefore you've got your custom XML using a template file. So really you've got a couple of options there. So to switch back so that you no longer have to worry about you would simply say, okay, so you would go back to the serialize key, and that would give you exactly what you needed. So now let's have a look at something else which is possibly quite common, and that's creating a sitemap. So I'll just go back up, I've just scrolled too far, there it is. So let's create a sitemap and just have a look at some of the options to do that. So copying in the code from, and we want to post, and then we want to go page, and post, and that's good, and pull in the router, and we know that my table doesn't have a slug, so we'll have to change that for ID. So really that's all you need to do if you were creating a sitemap. There it goes. Again, if you just want it without an extension, you would have to specify the view class, set class name XML, and then it would work as expected. Now let's have a look at just modifying some of the things here. So we know that we've overridden the root node. We can change the root node. We can also maybe make some changes to let's do this. We could say, alright, so I want this value. Now if we maybe if I put that in the right spot, it would be better. So what we're doing here, if we just reload, is we haven't made any changes at all, but by moving this into this into an array and into the @ key, I'm saying, well, that's the text of the node, but now I can actually add some attribute and then specify some more attributes and all sorts of things. So I can really start to override everything that I need. Now notice here that you have these variables for the view being set here, and you have to specify them as this in the serialize array. So something I like to do is move the array into its own variable, and then instead of having to then add each variable in, I can just do this. And so if I do want to add it's a lot simpler, so you don't have to specify things multiple times, but you get the ability to add things in using just a little bit simpler there. So that has been a short overview of XML and JSON views and getting them running within your CakePHP application.